Our guest today on Transition Talks is Gary Hall Jr., a three-time Olympian, 10-time Olympic medalist, and a member of the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame. After his athletic career, Gary turned his focus to the healthcare industry, creating awareness and working as an advocate for diabetes patient care. Gary, welcome to Transition Talks, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and want to talk about kind of your career and kind of the way that it ended. So just kind of share for our audience, was it something that was planned, or did something, a circumstance make the decision for you?
There was a lot about my career that was not planned. If you had asked me as a 15-year-old swimmer if I would still be competing in the sport at age 34, I would have had a good laugh, and so would have all my coaches. So, there was never really a plan, but once I had reached a certain level, I wanted to ride that as long as I could. I wanted to extend that window as long as I could. But all along, from the very beginning, it's a very finite window, but this is not something that we can do for our entire lives, be one of the best athletes in the world.
And did you stop competing after a certain point where you had kind of like made a predetermined decision, you and your family, like this is going to be my last competition, or was there an injury involved in terms of how that came about?
I was very fortunate to avoid injuries through my career. Was often criticized for backing off when I felt a pang, something that didn't feel right. I listened to my body and was able to extend the duration of my career significantly because of that. I retired in 2008 after the Olympic trials. Athletes in Olympic sports tend to think in quadrennial terms. And so I had won the gold medal in the 50-meter freestyle in 2004 and was the oldest man to win an individual gold medal since Duke Kahanamoku, the famous surfer swimmer from like the 20s and 30s. And so, I felt like the door was closing. I placed fourth at the Olympic trials, very satisfied with my time and performance. Felt like I had put it all out there. I had reached the top of the sport. So I was able to, in some ways, walk away after those trials without any regrets.
And you talked about kind of anticipating or shooting for that fourth Olympics, and just kind of talk to us about maybe kind of like that last couple of years. Were you putting things in place to kind of prepare for life after swimming, or did it kind of happen where you were just solely focused on your career and that was something that you would put off until your retirement?
Well, I took an approach very early that I would always maintain a life outside of sport. And so my circle of closest friends weren't swimmers. I never dated a swimmer through my entire career. I always kept a separate outside interest, whether it was in music or art or just other things. But the way that I began to prepare a career after sport was circumstance. And that was through the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, which came out of the blue, no family history of this disease. It happened after my first Olympic Games while I was training for my second Olympic Games. And it was a real threat to derail and end my career in sport. And so the fact that I was able to get that disease under control enough to again qualify for the Olympic Games, becoming the first person ever with type 1 diabetes to do that, becoming the first person with type 1 diabetes to win an Olympic medal, that rallied the support of the diabetes community behind me, and ultimately provided an opportunity to extend my swimming career. I went 10 out of 15 years that I represented the United States at the national team with absolutely no support from the sport of swimming. It was only through my work in the diabetes space, doing diabetes advocacy and support for nonprofits and diabetes research, that I was able to extend. And so when I was diagnosed and told by doctors that it was the end of my swimming career, oddly, it ended up becoming not just what sustained my swimming career, but ultimately what set up a professional career path for me post swimming.
Yeah, it's so great that you were able to kind of like take that moment of setback and adversity, and really obviously, have it be a huge part that fueled the rest of your career. And you mentioned something else that's really interesting too, and I think is important for the athletes to take note of, is you talked about having that life outside of sport. And so often we hear that athletes become singularly focused, and it's all about that sport all the time. And maybe just talk to us about, do you think that helped you as you transitioned out to kind of having realized early on in your career that you did want to have kind of this life outside of sport? Just talk to us about how maybe that assisted you as you came out of competition.
Yeah, it assisted me in competition, and it assisted me in coming out of competition as well. There Olympic training can be absolutely consuming. We all know, if you've been through that, even collegiate level swimming, people that experience real burnout, if not overuse, overload injuries, so common, underreported, the dropout rates in all sports. People weren't tracking this data at all for just until recently. And so, I even had a coach at one point say, if you can survive this training, you'll be a great swimmer. So, that's how all in I was training up to 8 hours every single day, just pushing myself to the limit. And that is just exhausting. It's absolutely consuming. It inhibits your ability to develop other skills. People that are all in this way and aren't I knew athletes that were coming out of retirement that had no idea how to navigate an Excel spreadsheet, and so it became a real handicap for them when entering the workforce after their careers in whatever sport. But it maintained a level of sanity too, and perspective that swimming isn't everything, that sport isn't everything, that the pressure of these competitions is very, very intense. But when you know that there's something more beyond the black line at the bottom of the pool, it creates a little bit of perspective that takes some of that intense pressure off. But I would take a full year off of training, swimming, after every Olympics I competed in. 1 full year.
Yeah, and you talked about perspective, and I think that's so important because, and yes, it's going to take a lot of commitment to obviously compete at the highest level, but if you can have the ability to kind of get outside of that, even just for a brief time every day, or kind of like you were doing, like really taking advantage of your off season, can really allow you to explore maybe other passions and other things you're interested in. And you talked about the diabetes advocacy that you're doing now. And, it seems like you were really kind of laying that path for yourself, even as you were kind of entering in the back half of your career. Did you experience any challenges mentally and physically, or did having that really kind of allow you to seamlessly transition out of your sport and then into the diabetes advocacy?
Yeah, so what I had in the swimming career was a lot of flexibility, right? It was easy for me to be able to go to events, and I call it the grip and grin circuit, where you're shaking hands and smiling, was able to do that while I was competing for 10 years before really transitioning out. And so by the time I did retire, I had 10 years of not paid basically work where I had just cold favor, you know, and raised a bunch of money for diabetes research organizations. And so what that enabled me to do was build a network that I was able to leverage in a more professional way once I was out of the sport and move on.
Can you share with us a little bit about that? Because I think that's really important to kind of focus on briefly. Was that something that somebody had told you about building a network, or was that something that as it started happening, you realized in that moment that this is going to be really beneficial to me as I transition?
Well, there has to be a sincerity. I don't think if you go in and you've got this ulterior motive plan to build a network that's going to make you a paid consultant for biotech companies later on, that it comes across. But when you do someone a favor, they're likely to remember it. When you do somebody's kid a favor, they will never forget it. And so being able to work with young kids that are diagnosed with this very scary disease and reassure their parents that it can be managed, they're going to be okay, they can do whatever they want to do as long as they're taking care of it, providing that message of hope. There were a lot of people through that very, very sincere effort that remembered that, right? When it was time to make transitions, and if you ever needed a favor, it was a phone call away. And so when I started doing this stuff, it was because I wanted to give back to those kids. But what I realized in time was that, hey, I have built this huge network of politicians and policymakers and advocacy groups. And, people can tell, they can tell, they see right through integrity. Like, is this person sincere? It comes across. And so just through those years of caring and trying to help others, came back in a beneficial way professionally.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing a lot is you're talking about authenticity and really just coming from a place of genuine interest and genuine caring. And kind of to echo what you just mentioned, I mean, people can pick up on that versus people that are just kind of shaking hands and trying to accumulate, people in their network. So I totally agree with you on that. And talk to us a little bit about the transferable skills that you use. You had this incredible competitive career, obviously, a ton of work ethic, a ton of discipline that went into, each of these Olympic runs and just, competing all the time. What transferable skills do you think you use on a daily basis now that directly come from your experience as an athlete?
Okay, well, I grew up swimming. And I remember as a youngster hearing Olympians come in and tell tales of dedication and commitment and hard work and goal attainment and all the things. We all know why sport is good, right?
Right.
And I had the ability to see very famous athletes up on stage in front at a sales conference, an NFL lineman, talking to a sales force about how what they're doing on the football field relates to their call center job or something like that. I had a hard transition. I retired from sport in 2008. The economy was crashing and on fire at that point. Tons of layoffs, huge unemployment rates, and jumped right into a very low-level middle marketing position, like 53 employees in a call center. Under nothing I learned in sport applied at all. I mean, I hate to burst the bubble of people that say that they're really, yes, you want to be successful in anything, hard work. That is true across the board. But I found and realized in this very tough transition into a professional career that you're at a huge disadvantage, that how you snap a football or make a block or something like that, or swim a lap, is very limited in how you're going to be benefited in a professional environment. And in fact, it's something of a disadvantage a lot of times that as athletes, especially those that don't develop outside interests while they are competing, become a machinist, an assembly line, pulling a lever, do this, pull a lever on an assembly boat for 20 years. That's what I equate to swimming, because it's a lot of back and forth in the same, lane, just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden there's a change of management or new technology is introduced, and that factory worker who's used to doing this lever pull thing is all of a sudden asked to do something completely different. And so I see a lot of athletes struggle with that they have this routine that they've mastered, that they're one of the best in the world at, and then they're asked to do a new trick and just get caught wide-eyed. And it's sad. It's sad when that happens. And so my encouragement is that, yes, hard work can be transitioned, setting goals, never giving up, that type of true grit mentality, great stuff. Definitely pulled from sport, instilled in our being, and pushes us to succeed. And you see some athletes take that and transition it into in a way that make them ultimately successful. There seems to be the two type, one that really, really struggles with it and others that really, really excel with it. And maybe not so many in between. But I will say this before it sounds like I've completely discredited what athletic accomplishment does in terms of a professional career post court or field or pool, is that I had heard all these Olympians talk about commitment, dedication, structure, all these things. And I was like, at the time, 12, 13 years old, and it was like in one ear and out the other. But it wasn't until I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes that I felt like those qualities that had been referenced, that had for years, like chlorine, seeped into my being, my bloodstream, surfaced. And those things that I was good at in training and competing in the sport made me very, very good at managing my diabetes, and in a way that allowed me to get back into sport. And so that was the first time that my eyes really were open to, hey, there is some connection to what we're learning here in sport, and how we apply it to other things outside of life. And I'm sure probably more than I've taken time to acknowledge, those same skill sets have helped me professionally.
Yeah, totally. And we appreciate your honesty, obviously. I mean, one of the things that I think this reinforces is really kind of the importance of having interests outside of your sport. You can definitely spend the 8 hours training, but that doesn't preclude you from being interested in having a hobby or maybe exploring some other potential future career opportunities. Because like you said, when you leave and now you're interviewing for those first jobs and then you get those first jobs, it's great, that you were super successful in your previous career. That has nothing to do with making phone calls or selling software or wherever you end up. So I think it is an important message to hear in terms of understanding that there will be another chapter.
Yes. And it is what you make it, right? I remember in 2008, there's millions of layoffs across the country, and no matter how successful I was as an Olympic athlete, I was still turning up to job interviews with a resume that said swimmer.
And it's great to talk about for 10 minutes, but then it's yeah, we'll let you know, Gary.
Yeah.
So well, talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're doing now, because I know you're very heavily involved in this space, and it's obviously been a passion of yours for a long time. So just share with us kind of how you got to this place and what you're involved in currently.
Sure. So because diabetes is such a huge problem around the world, broader healthcare systems have recognized a need for diabetes programming and stuff like that. And so I graduated up through the ranks of diabetes advocacy work. I served for 3 years on the government Relations Committee for JDRF, the largest diabetes research organization in the world, doing policy wonk stuff in Washington, D.C., working with geniuses that would provide the Food and Drug Administration with guidance documents on how to embrace emerging technologies in medical devices and pharmaceuticals and diabetes management. Did that for a number of years, working with both sides of the aisle. Politically, diabetes affects everyone, so it was pretty easy to do in terms of a nonpartisan issue in Washington, D.C. There's not that many, so did that, and then I was graduated up to a broader healthcare system. I serve on the international board, which is a governing board for Sanford Health. That's SANFORD. They're based in the Midwest, operate out of 26 states, a huge integrated healthcare organization. And so I'm also able to work as a consultant, typically juggle 3 to 5 clients anytime, biotech company, life science companies that are looking to connect and integrate into these larger healthcare systems. And so we build children's hospitals, hospitals internationally in rural underserved communities, something like 16 hospitals in the last few years in Ghana, and other, really like people who need medical assistance. Obviously today, in today's climate with COVID, everybody, it needs medical attention, have medical concerns. And it really brings into focus how important that work is, not medical research type of stuff, and then care, delivery of care. So to be involved in that pocket, it's been really rewarding. So that position with Sanford Health, I've been on that board in a variety of other positions with that organization now for over 10 years. Another organization is the National Youth Sport Health and Safety Institute. And that is an organization under the American College of Sports Medicine, the largest organization of its kind. And they disseminate best recommendations and policy to everything from Pee Wee League all the way up to the professional sports. They work with every sport organization in the country. So that's rewarding work. I specifically have a focus on the management of chronic conditions in sport and physical activity. And so that got me published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. I worked on the International Olympic Committee consensus statement on youth sport addressing this. So I'm always the dumbest guy in the room. That's my objective, I think, professionally, is I just like to surround myself by really, really smart people and just kind of nod a lot. But
those are the best rooms.
It takes a cheerleader position in that totem. And I've always considered myself a cheerleader of other smart people's work.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I was saying, that those are the rooms you want to be in, where, you are surrounded by great people. You are surrounded by smart people that are trying to do great things. So that's really great.
You have to do what you love too. I mean, the passion has to be there, the sincerity, the integrity that we talked about earlier. And that I get to explore. And one of the clients consulting with is Mankind. And they have this new inhalable insulin, so no more shots of insulin. And I oversee the patient advocacy. So I work with all the grassroots organizations and still am able to maintain that contact with kids that are newly diagnosed, that are trying to wrap their heads around like what this disease is and how it's going to affect their lives and stuff. So that has never wavered, that interest, that passion. And if you can just take something that you love and that you're passionate about, like sport, and just apply that work ethic that you learn along the way, you'll have the same successes that you experienced in sport in your career afterwards.
Yeah, that's so great. And we can just see it on your face as you start talking about it. Like you have that genuine enthusiasm and that passion certainly about this. And maybe, do you have any advice for all the athletes out there? We talked about kind of like, creating a life outside of your sport. Do you have any maybe practical advice or things that you've seen in your career that you would maybe tell some of the younger athletes?
Yeah, it's important in today's culture because we're getting a widening divide between the ultra competitive 8-year-old travel team in youth sport and the sedentary and morbidly obese. And it's the advice that my father gave me. And My father was a 3-time Olympian, 10 world records, world swimmer of the year twice. He was the only swimmer besides Michael Phelps, who just carried it recently, to carry the flag in the United States opening ceremony for the flag for the United States at the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games. And, he was all along capable of telling me how to do a better flip turn. The only advice that he ever gave me was have fun. And that's very, very important. It's the athlete who has fun that wins, not the athlete that wins who has fun. And so that's what I encourage others to do. It provides some perspective. Sport is, at the end of the day, entertainment. It's not life or death. We all love it passionately and can be consumed with it. But if you remember to have some fun along the way, there is no losing.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I look back to the best teams I've ever been on, and without question, they're the teams that had the most fun. And I think you're right. I think there's 100% connection there.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your passion with us and the advice to the athletes. And, again, really appreciate you being here and sharing your message. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, keep up the good work you're doing.
Thank you. Yep, we'll do for sure. Yep. Have a good one.
Yeah, take care.